Over time, it's been interesting to see the differences between acceptance versus tolerance from family, chosen family, and friends. And it is interesting to think, a lot of the support I was receiving back then was largely because I was still within that framework of the church's teachings as I was attending college. Hello and welcome to the podcast, to another episode of Clearly Overthinking. I'm your host, Adam Harper. First of all, y'all, happy Pride Month. Oh my goodness, I love Pride. I love celebrating it. I love learning about my shared queer history and championing those in the LGBTQIA+ community. And you better believe I am always including something rainbow in my daily outfit. Well, today is a bit of a throwback episode, as you can probably tell by the title of the podcast. Recently, it was brought to my attention that an article I had written 7 years ago was still visible on the internet. And I'm going to share with you what I said and reflect on what I wrote regarding my experiences grappling with what I then referred to being gay as same-sex attraction and the reconciliation of that with my beliefs as a Mormon. It's a mix of emotions, thinking about how long ago that was, and yet feeling like it was just yesterday. I thought I had archived a large majority of my online presence years ago, so needless to say, it took me by surprise. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to let you know that I'll be discussing my experiences with my queerness as it relates to a religious environment. And while this episode touches on the topics of faith, sexuality, and the personal struggle within that, if you or someone you know is going through something similar or has gone through something similar, please take care while listening. My intention has always been to share my journey with honesty and empathy, and I hope that this episode resonates with you. Alrighty, I'd like to go ahead and read what I wrote 7 years ago. My experience has been very emotional and impactful in my life. To start from the very beginning, I'm someone who has same-gender attraction. At first, I didn't know what that was. I didn't quite recognize what it was until spring semester of 2016. That was when I finally realized and admitted to myself that this was a part of me. During that time, I wasn't sure which road I wanted to take. If I wanted to keep living the gospel or if I wanted to live that lifestyle of acting on the attraction. That is something I think everyone has to decide in their life. Do you believe what your parents have taught you? Do you want to keep living the way that you've grown up knowing? I'm going to a church school. I've made covenants. I have my family to think about. But at the same time, I have these feelings and attractions, and it's something that I don't necessarily think will just go away at the drop of a hat. However, I knew I had to figure it out. There comes a point at a time where you have to decide what side of the fence you're going to be on. For a time, I did act on it, but I recognized that I wasn't truly happy. It was fulfilling a physical and emotional need, but as far as the bigger picture, I was losing that. I wasn't as close to my Heavenly Father as I was when I got home from my mission. Then I just had this moment where things were just falling apart around me. And that was the moment that the Spirit just shook me and told me that I need to get a hold of myself and understand what is going on. One of my favorite quotes says, "When we hit our lowest point, we are open to the greatest change." And I felt like I hit a really low point during fall semester last year. And that's when the Spirit reminded me that Heavenly Father still loves me. He wants me to be happy, and He has not forgotten about me. I don't consider myself to be part of the LGBT community. I consider myself, as Elder Bednar says, quote, "a member of the church who deals with same-gender attraction," close quote. There are no gay members. There are members of the church who deal with this. I am not somebody who is going to fight on the subject or walk in parades. I respect others who are part of the LGBT community, and I understand what they're going through, but it's not what I want to do. The whole process these past couple of months has been accepting who I am, living with it, and understanding that blessings will be filled in the Lord's time. I currently love to see women who are beautiful with great personalities, but I don't look at the physical characteristics right now. So for right now, I'm embracing myself. but not acting on it. I want to live the gospel faithfully. It is a day-by-day process. Some days are harder than others, and I'll pray to Heavenly Father for strength. Oftentimes, it's in the little things, and I think people forget that. Going to church, saying your prayers, reading your scriptures, and choosing the right is what saves us. That is why they teach us from such a young age. When I was going through the time of acting on this, I was having a harder time focusing in church. I really wasn't reading my scriptures, and my prayers and my relationship with God suffered. I am now able to go to the temple more often, be more active in church, and I understand that the bigger picture and having that relationship is more important to me than physical desires. I don't want to ruin my eternal relationship for a mortal and physical relationship because it won't bring me eternal happiness. Okay, y'all. Whew. Okay, that was everything from that post. Again, it wasn't super long by any stretch of the imagination, but I I had to take a little minute after reading that, just kind of like recollect my thoughts, because it is weird, if I'm being completely transparent, to read that back. And I'll get into this a little bit more, but it's a lot, and it's just crazy to think again that was me. I wrote that, so yeah. When I recently rediscovered this post and article, my initial reaction, as I mentioned, was kind of shock. Like I feel like I'd done such a great job at, archiving so many things online and my association with the Mormon faith. And it felt like looking at a past version of myself that I didn't necessarily want on display anymore. I had to process it for a minute, thinking, how is this publicly available? And it was wild to think how long ago that was. Like 7 years is a long time, but also it feels like it's just flown by. It just seems like it can go like in a blink of an eye, but again, 7 years. What I do find interesting is the language in this post and article reflects my mindset at the time. And it's interesting to see how my writing style has evolved over time. And especially back then, the language that I used was very faith-based, and it was clear that I was struggling to process my feelings. You can really see that in between the lines. I was trying to make sense of my sexuality using the language and tools I was given by my faith. And this post does feel somewhat disjointed, which makes sense because I was trying to piece together my identity and my beliefs, and it's strange to read it now and feel like it's not me anymore, even though it is. The language shows I was really grappling to understand not only myself, but how this was going to integrate with my faith, and all I had was the terminology, the faith-based terminology that I had at my disposal. Back then, I was very involved in the church and believed that the answers I was given were the only way to understand my sexuality. My perspective, I feel, was very narrow at the time. But now I feel like my beliefs have broadened significantly. I feel like I have a greater sense of self and a more accepting view of other beliefs and faiths. And I really feel like my perspective has broadened and expanded. I used to think that what I was taught growing up was the ultimate and only truth, but now I feel like there are so many other truths out there as well and other ways to interpret life and the world. And I'm really grateful that my journey has allowed me to see the diversity of experiences and beliefs in the world. While my faith played a huge role in my understanding and acceptance of my sexuality at that time, I feel like faith can often serve as a way to connect the pieces of life when there aren't clear answers. I was trying to understand why I felt the way that I did using the language and context provided by my faith. And I really didn't know what it meant to be gay or part of the LGBTQ community. Terms like same-sex attraction were my way of grappling with my feelings. And if I'm being honest, it sounds like a diagnosis. That's just my opinion. It was hard because the language I had access to didn't fully capture what I was experiencing, but faith at the time acted as a framework for making sense of something that didn't make sense. When I originally shared this post, I didn't face much backlash from friends, family, or the local community. I was going to college at a Mormon school, and most of the people that I knew were supportive, both in person and online. My main concern was how my family would react. And previously, I'd come out as bisexual as I was trying to understand my feelings, but over time, it's been interesting to see the differences between acceptance versus tolerance from family, chosen family, and friends. And it is interesting to think, a lot of the support I was receiving back then was largely because I was still within that framework of the church's teachings as I was attending college. Since writing this post, I feel like I've really stepped into myself. I've grown into someone my past self needed. Growth and change never stop. And I can see the significant changes in myself over the past 7 years. And I gotta be honest with you, it's wild to see how much has changed and how much I've evolved. And I truly believe in the idea of becoming the version of yourself that your childhood self needed. I'm continuously evolving and growing, as I hope that many of us are as well, striving to be the best versions of ourselves, or as I actually prefer to say, favorite versions of ourselves. This journey has been about embracing change and allowing myself to grow in ways that I couldn't have imagined back then. It's interesting to revisit past memories and beliefs because it can be a little bittersweet. Nostalgia is personally very tricky for me. Sometimes I wish I could change my past beliefs, but also I really appreciate how those experiences shaped who I am today. And I approach my past with respect and understanding, and to recognize that that was part of my journey. Nostalgia can bring up those emotions of wishing things had been different, but I know that every experience has contributed to who I am now. And it's important to respect that journey and to recognize that it's okay to have evolved from past beliefs. A few people have asked me, how do you balance sharing parts of your life like this and being open about this? And I have to say, balancing and sharing personal experiences while really being sensitive to those who may be still within the faith or who may be grappling with their own sexuality or identity or just anything in between. It's kind of like flexing a mental muscle, finding the commonalities in storytelling and connecting with people without really, getting too personal or too uncomfortable. And I've always enjoyed creating content and sharing stories. And it's so fun to see how, as I've looked in the past and seen, how I shared this initial story 7 years ago, I've always felt like I wanted to create something. I've always wanted to create an experience, a story, or some way that I can connect with people. I've talked about this before, but vulnerability specifically, I've come to learn is about sharing what's important to you and letting people into your world. And it is a fine line on how much to share and how much to kind of, reserve for yourself. But I believe in the power of storytelling to connect with others and resonate with shared experiences. I was thinking about this as I was kind of consolidating all of my thoughts. If I could go back and talk to my past self, I feel like I'd say, you're going to be okay. And I know that, maybe we hear that a lot today sometimes, but I really feel like it's important to hear that reassurance, especially in difficult times, in self-defining times. I would want to tell myself that I'm going to grow and evolve and love life tremendously. And the changes are going to be for the better. I would tell myself, you're going to lose some relationships, and yet you're going to gain amazing relationships. And the people who come into your life are going to love and accept you for who you are. They're going to champion you and push you to continue evolving and growing. And it's okay to not have everything figured out. And it's okay to take time to understand yourself. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, kind of giving a thoughtful heads up that, this is something that is common to people who have grown up in a religious environment who are also queer, or even anybody who has just grown up in a religious environment in general who isn't queer either, and I just feel like I want to just capstone all of this by saying to anyone experiencing similar struggles or journeys or questions or anything related to their faith or their sexuality, I want to emphasize that you are whole and complete. You are not broken. You are not a problem. And I want to encourage you so much to choose to love yourself. And that is, if I'm being so transparent right now, it's not the easiest step to take. But as you continue to take that step, to continue to choose and to re-choose and to do that over and over to love yourself, it gets easier. Lean into that self-love and acceptance. That was a huge part of my journey, and I know that it changed my whole perspective. You are your first priority at the end of the day, and loving yourself is probably the most important step you can take, if I'm being flat out with you. Continue to just embrace who you are and remember that you are deserving of love and happiness. I always love wrapping up a podcast with a quote, and I really wanted to find something that resonated with what I talked about today, resonates with Pride Month and queerness in general. So today's quote comes from Suzanne DeWitt Hall. They said, "Transition is a process and an exploration of self, and explorations often reveal unexpected things. The destination is not certain and isn't the point. The journey of discovery is where growth happens." Well, y'all, that about wraps things up. Thank you again for listening today, and it really means a lot to be able to share this space with you as I reflect on experiences and feelings that I had 7 years ago. And it's crazy to think, again, how much time has gone by, but I would love to know what you thought of today's episode in today's social posts. And if you aren't already, be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button so you get notified when new episodes drop. They drop every other week, so be on the lookout for more coming soon. But until then, have an amazing day, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Queerly Overthinking is hosted, edited, and executive produced by Adam Harper, with additional producing by Cass Cooper. You can follow Queerly Overthinking on Instagram or TikTok at Queerly Overthinking, and you can find more at www.queerlyoverthinking.com.